It is possible that more than one person will be editing or adjusting the data that is displayed in our program. If the underlying data changes, we want our view to be updated. To do that, let's return to our employee class, where we will implement the iNotifyPropertyChanged interface. iNotifyPropertyChanged requires that we add a using statement for system component model, and it requires that we implement an event. The event we must implement is called PropertyChanged. It is of type PropertyChanged event handler. We're going to call PropertyChanged each time one of our properties is updated. To facilitate that, we're going to use a helper method called onPropertyChanged. OnPropertyChange uses the caller member name, and that requires a using statement for system runtime compiler services. And what that does is it passes in the name of the property that calls this method. Unfortunately, we can no longer use automatic properties because we need to call the onPropertyChanged method every time we call the setter. Thus, we will create a backing variable for each of the properties, and in the setter, we will call onPropertyChanged after assigning the passed-in value to the underlying backing variable. We've done that for name, let's do that for title. Now our view will be updated if the underlying data changes. But how will we know that? How can we test that? Let's go and modify our main page just a bit. Here we have, as you remember, an outer stack panel with two inner stack panels. And after the second inner stack panel, we're now going to add a button. And for that button, we will add a click event handler. In the button click event handler, which is in the code behind, we're going to make a little change to the logic. Rather than having the data context set in the constructor as it is now with whatever we get back from getEmployee, we're going instead to create a private member variable of type employee, which we'll call EMP. In the constructor, we'll go ahead and instantiate that employee, and in the button click event handler, we're going to reassign the name and the title of that employee. And we can do that simply by saying emp.name equal and giving it a different value. And then we can say emp.title equals and setting a value for the title. That will mimic the effect of the data changing while it's being displayed in our one-way binding. Before we run that, we do have to set, of course, the data context. So let's come back to the constructor and say that the data context is equal to EMP. Let's run the application. And notice we get our initial name and title and a great big change button. We're not going to change the name and title through this interface, but instead we're going to mimic it changing in the underlying data. And as soon as it does, our view is updated because of iNotifyPropertyChanged.